The cell light flickered once before dying. For a moment, the prison fell into a darkness so pure, it hummed. In that silence, Elias Ward whispered into the void, "If they ever find the letter, they'll know. My darkest wish wasn't for freedom." The echo of his voice met the dripping pipes and vanished. Then came the sound of a key one that shouldn't have turned that night. Elias Ward had spent 7 years in Graythorn Prison, a place built from the bones of old factories and the secrets of men who didn't want to be remembered. He was the kind of inmate the guards forgot to hate: quiet, precise, always reading when others gambled or fought. Once he'd been a civil engineer, designing bridges that carried people home. Now, he counted cracks in the ceiling above his bunk, each one like a failed promise. The prison air smelled of bleach and sweat, but Elias found comfort in the routine: the clang of doors, the scrape of trays, the measured steps between his cell and the library. He told himself order was safer than hope, but there was a scar beneath that calm. 7 years ago, he'd confessed to a crime he didn't commit. Not for money, not for mercy, but for someone he refused to name. That night, as the light died and the hallway fell silent, Elias sat with a folded sheet of paper tucked inside his shirt pocket. It was his last piece of truth, a confession, written not for parole, but for penance. He'd promised himself he would never send it. But tonight, something had changed. Someone had left the door unlocked. The guard rounds were late. The hum of the security lights faltered. Elias noticed the rhythm of the hallway change, as if the building itself was holding its breath. He stood by the bars, eyes narrowing on the distant figure moving past the cells. It wasn't a guard. The steps were too careful, too deliberate. When the figure stopped outside his door, Elias saw a flash of something metallic, a key ring. "Ward," a voice whispered. Female, steady. "You don't know me, but I know why you're here." He froze. Visitors were impossible at this hour. "You need to leave," he said quietly. But she slid a folded photograph through the bars. His hand shook as he lifted it, his wife, years younger, smiling beside their son. Except his son should have been dead. She met his gaze. "He's alive, and he's asking questions." The cell light came back to life, and in that sterile glow, Elias saw the mark on her uniform, an investigative badge, not prison staff. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "No one. I'm here because of what you wrote," she replied. "Your letter was never destroyed." A pulse of fear and hope collided in his chest. The letter he'd written the night before, sentencing the one he'd hidden inside the frame of his old drafting table, was supposed to be gone. "If that letter exists," he whispered, "then someone knows my darkest wish." Her name was Mara Holt, an independent investigator looking into corruption linked to the same bridge collapse that sent Elias to prison. She had found pieces of his confession hidden in the archives, a document rewritten, redacted, then sealed. "You didn't cause that collapse," she said, "but you took the blame. Why?" Elias looked away. "Because the truth would have killed him." "Your son?" He didn't answer. Outside, thunder rolled across the yard. The rain began soft, then punishing. The sound filled the corridor like applause from ghosts. Mara leaned closer. "Someone wanted that bridge gone, and they used you to bury it. The people who signed off on the faulty design, they're still free. You can clear your name tonight." He shook his head. "Freedom isn't what I wished for." Mara's brow furrowed. "Then what was?" Elias hesitated, his voice barely more than breath. to keep my family safe, even if it meant living as their ghost. The storm cracked, lights flickering. In that flicker, he saw a shadow move at the far end of the block, a guard, listening. The guard's footsteps echoed, fading down another corridor. Mara slid him a pen and a sheet of official letterhead. "Write down the names," she urged. "We can end this." Elias stared at the paper as though it were a loaded weapon. He'd waited 7 years to tell the truth, but now that it was here, his hands wouldn't move. "Mara," he said finally, "you don't understand. My confession wasn't about guilt. It was a trade." She frowned. "For what?" "For silence," he said. "There was a safety report, one that would have exposed the company. My signature buried it. In exchange, they protected my family. But when the bridge fell, I became the scapegoat by design." Mara's breath hitched. "You signed your own sentence." He nodded. "And that was my darkest wish, that they'd never know the cost of their safety." She pressed the pen back toward him. "You can still make it right." But he shook his head slowly. "If I do, my son loses everything. The inheritance, the name, the life I traded mine for. Justice is just another kind of cruelty." The thunder outside deepened, shaking dust from the ceiling. The old prison groaned like it was alive. Somewhere, a siren wailed. "Then why meet me?" Mara asked. Elias turned toward the narrow window where lightning painted the bars white. "Because I think someone else already found the letter." The hallway lights died again. In that blackness, Mara's voice trembled. "Who?" Elias's answer came like a knife dragged across glass. "My son." The power outage triggered the lockdown alarm. Doors slammed across the block, sealing every corridor. Red emergency lights bled through the dark. Mara tried her radio, but static swallowed her voice. Elias stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the far cell, where a flicker of movement broke the red glow. A young man stood behind the bars, same eyes, same quiet composure. Elias's breath stopped in his throat. "Caleb," he whispered. The boy didn't move closer. "They said you'd tell me why you did it," he said. Mara looked between them, realization dawning. "He's been here the whole time." Caleb stepped forward. "Mom's gone. The truth killed her. And I found your letter." Elias's hands gripped the bars so hard his knuckles turned white. "Then you know everything I gave up." "I know what you protected," Caleb said coldly, "and what you destroyed." The storm howled through the open corridor. The world outside blurred in rain and red light. Elias whispered, "I never wanted you to carry this." "You don't get to choose that anymore," his son replied. "You wanted to save me, but you made me live in your shadow." The alarms blared again. Guards were approaching. Mara's voice cut through the chaos. "We have to move now." But Elias didn't step back. His son stared at him through the bars, and in that look, Elias saw both judgment and mercy, like looking at a mirror that remembered who he was. Mara reached for Elias's arm. "If you stay, they'll bury you deeper." He shook his head. "Maybe that's the only place the truth belongs." Caleb pulled something from his pocket, a sealed envelope, creased and weathered. "Your letter," he said. "I could destroy it right now. No one would ever know." Elias nodded slowly. "That's what I wanted, but if you've come this far, maybe you already understand." Caleb's voice trembled. "Understand what?" "That a man's darkest wish isn't always evil," Elias said. "Sometimes it's mercy." For a heartbeat, the air between them held everything unsaid. Years of loss, guilt, and love disguised as punishment. Then Caleb slipped the letter through the bars and whispered, "Then you finish what you started?" The guards' shouts grew louder. Mara pulled the lever that unlocked the emergency gate. "We can still get out!" she yelled. Elias looked at his son one last time. "No," he said softly. "You can." He stepped back into his cell, sealing himself inside, the letter clutched in his hand. As Mara and Caleb disappeared into the corridor, he unfolded the paper and began to write across the bottom margin. His final line. "The truth was never the curse. It was the gift I couldn't give." By morning, the storm had cleared. The guards found Elias Ward in his cell, the letter laid neatly beside him. It wasn't a confession anymore. It was a design. Drawn in pencil were blueprints of a bridge, unlike any he'd built before, arches of light spanning two sides of a chasm, labeled only Father and Son. No one knew what the drawing meant, but those who saw it swore the lines seemed to move like a bridge still being built somewhere no one could see. And in the final sentence, barely visible beneath the graphite, were 5 words that no rain could wash away. This was the prisoner's darkest wish.